Welcome, everybody. If you would like to take a seat, we would love to be graced by your presence inside. Sandy, is this loud enough? I think it needs to be loud. I can't hear myself. I think so as well. Loud, yeah. I know I'm getting old, but I really can't hear it. Hello, Simon. Oh, that is so much better, Sandy. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Come on and take a seat. Some familiar faces. I know you from Logan. This gent over there. So who drove in? So you got the free car wash. Well done. Who trained in? Good, energy efficient. Who walked? You walked a little bit from somewhere in the valley. Lovely. The locals. Who's a local? Who's from around the valley? Show of hands. Excellent. Well, I drove, then I walked, then I raced, and finally got here. So for those of you who are expecting to start a little earlier, it's my fault. I'm a little bit late because I came from the beautiful Gold Coast, and I'm not sorry about it. I love living there. My goal is to, quietly go into the forest somewhere, but still come and grace events like this because they're so important to me. So those of you who don't know me, and I believe we have an online community. So hello to whoever's online. I think you're up there. Welcome. And so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Pauline. I actually work in technology and have for many, many years. I'm originally from Papua New Guinea. Does anyone know where Papua New Guinea is? If you don't, what? Come on, man. Papua New Guinea is all the way just above Australia. It's actually not that far away, but it is a beautiful, quite deadly country, and it's not far away, 3.5 hours flight. But for me, when I was 16 years old, it felt like a lifetime away. So I graced myself here in the wonderful Brisbane, Australia, back when I was actually 16. I think I was 15 or 16 on the cusp of, and I came to school here. I was very privileged to do so. My dad worked for an organisation that paid for school fees, so I got sent over. I think they were more happy than anything else because they got to offload the smallest child outside of the house. When I came to Australia, it was extremely daunting because I had an international accent, firstly. I was the only brown kid in my school at the time, in my class. I got quite bullied, but I became a wonderful bully myself. So I learnt some really naughty traits. And then as soon as I got into working and the working life, I had all of those shed off by the nature of working with humans. So for me, my goal was to work with technology. So I went and strolled myself so I could actually work with tech rather than humans, and did information systems, worked my way to navigate a career that was completely unplanned, risky. I was quite alone in Australia, but I made it through because all the people I met along the way. So sessions like today, hopefully where you can meet a few people along the way, where you can actually get connected to help you grow your business. Apart from my career in IT, I actually went and dabbled into entrepreneurship as well. I wear a number of hats, but today my current hats are I head up innovation labs for the Australia Computer Society, together with a wonderful team. One of them's in the audience, Laura Ashmole over there. Wave your hands, Laura. No one can see you there. So if you ever need to talk to someone about how to actually build an emerging technology company, please go and talk to Laura. Come grab myself. We have a lab called River City Labs, which is located just upstairs from here. You can see in the window the logo there. So feel free to check us out. But that's one of the hats, as well as we work across the community doing things like this, because what we're trying to do is get more people like you into business, into entrepreneurship, or into technology, my personal bias. Because today, everyone has access to be able to build a technology contribution or impact to the world, because it's quite easy to be self-taught. You'll learn a bit about that tonight. All you have to be able to do is take the bold risk and educate yourself and get, can I say this? I don't think I can, balls deep in that. No way around it. Make it your business because there aren't any handouts, no silver bullets, but just a little bit of hard work, a bit of grit, a little bit of less ego, and willing to talk to any people you can so they can help you along the way. So welcome. Thank you for having me, and I will be your host for tonight. So firstly, the most important thing that I do love to do is just remind myself and everyone. Yes, I default to paper still, so sorry for the shuffle, but I think it's really important to acknowledge the land in which I'm standing on today. So I would like to pay my respect and acknowledgement to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who were the first scientists, astronomers, geologists, ecologists, engineers, and entrepreneurs of this land, building their deep knowledge about the nature and the world which we have lived for thousands of generations. Here in Australia today, we, many of you from many different lands, are continuing to build on this tradition of inquiry and curiosity and custodianship, adding to the rich soil of tapestry of what innovation is truly about. I respectfully acknowledge the Yurraga and Turrbal people as the traditional owners and the First Nations people of the land in which I'm standing from today. This land was taken, and I acknowledge that. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and all community leaders and entrepreneurs from First Nations who may be here today, building on your own continued evolution of your culture and rich history. Back to paper. I don't really need it actually, because I never really write much down. So I would love to firstly introduce the wonderful Julia Spicer, Queensland's chief entrepreneur, amazing supporter of many of those who are in the room, myself personally, as well as a lot of the entrepreneurs across Queensland. Welcome on.
Hello, everybody. I would also like to echo some of the sentiments that Pauline's just mentioned in her welcome, but also acknowledge I live out at Gundawindi on Bigambul country, and whenever I drive in, it's about a 4.5 hour drive. I'm really conscious of the multiple traditionally owned lands on which I traverse to get from Gundawindi into Brisbane, and then when I'm travelling around Queensland. Pauline talked about first scientists, first ecologists, first geologists. They're a great example for us to be able to think about in terms of community, how we work together, and what are we actually doing in this piece of wanting to create impact and value for our community. I grew up in Western Queensland on Menandangi country out at Roma, so I'm conscious I'm a white person talking at this event today, but what I really think is important is that for some of us in the room, I use my privilege to ensure that I can create safe space for people to have conversations. In my work career to date, that's been particularly around the role that women play in agriculture. It's been around the role that First Nations and traditional owner groups play in terms of being able to engage and be part of conversations with local councils, with state governments, with primary producers and farmers. And so I often end up being able to be the translator, the networker, the connector between different people who are looking for often a common goal, but maybe coming at it from a slightly different language or maybe coming at it from a slightly different viewpoint. I am involved in some small businesses. You will hear from really large-scale business people today throughout the course of this event. And I'm here to say that I'm involved with small micro businesses, a few of them. I've been in a position where I've been able to create myself a job, and I've created up to 4 or 5 different roles at different times for other, mainly women, in my small rural community. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. I think one of the things that maybe where regional people, we actually connect a little bit around those with multicultural backgrounds is this sometimes this sense of isolation. There's 6,000 people in my community. That's the number of people that live in my town. But I am that weirdo that's only really doing the entrepreneurial stuff in a way. And so it's really lonely. I have to come to Brisbane to find other weirdos like Yupin who comes up from the Gold Coast to hang out with me. Thanks, Yupen. Sissy, you know, my weirdo friends are here with me. It's important. And so I think this piece around isolation and how we make sure that we can really quickly connect people in is incredibly important. So I will say at the beginning that there are many pathways into business and opportunities across all of Queensland. One of the things we need to do and do well is ask. And let me tell you, I am very happy to be your wing woman at events. If you're ever at an event and you see me, my superpower is connections. If you've seen the Bridget Jones movie and you see the weird way that she introduces people, welcome to my style of introductions. There's people in the room who have had to experience it. But I think it's really important that I can help connect people around different opportunities and make sure that people know what's going on, right? So if you're sitting there going, oh, I'm the only person that doesn't know that this grant's out at the moment, what's wrong with me? That will not be the case. Yep, there'll be other people. Or I'm not the only, I'm not the only person that doesn't know people in government. There will be others who don't. And so I really want to make sure that we can use events like this and other opportunities to connect you. Which brings me to a point where we actually have some really important connectors and supporters across a few different government departments in the room. And I'm going to get you to wave your hands in the air like you just don't care, but you do care. I'm going to get you to raise your hand so that people can actually turn and find you, because we've got some networking time after this and I want to make sure that everybody can eyeball the people we need. So events like this don't happen unless we all partner together and do some work. We are very grateful to have Wayne Briscoe with us this evening. Wayne's the first person to wave his hand in the air. Wayne is the Executive Director of Multicultural Affairs Queensland, so is in a really senior role within MAQ, which is what we call it. And Wayne's got several of his team members here. Artie's here, Mel's here, Carolyn's here. People are raising their hands in the air. So a really good network. We have got Michael is here, Regional Director for Desbert, so small business and training, and there's others from small business as well. Yes. So small business and training is another department within the Queensland government that you want to make sure that you're connected with. And then within Advanced Queensland, which is the innovation department for Queensland government, we've got Steph here, I'm here, Sandy was around, Sandy's right there in the beautiful pink dress, can't miss her. So Advanced Queensland is another one of those government departments that we want to make sure you, oh, Tina's there. God, everybody's poking out from behind. Tina's also here. So again, if you aren't connected in, if you're not following the social media of some of these departments, I would really recommend that you do that. That's where on all of the socials you can find out about grants, events, opportunities. But it's also in our best interest across the departments to make sure that we're tapping people in, because you have the solutions to the problems that we're all trying to solve. And I think that's the most important piece, right? In our local communities, in my local community, there are people that are solving the problems for Gundawindi. What we've got is the opportunity to say, where are similar communities that have the same problem that could be scaled? What are the problems that we're sorting in our own community that are actually starting to solve problems at a regional, state, national or international level? And you then get to decide the scale at which you want your business to grow. That's up to you. That's the beauty of us being in small businesses. We get to decide. I want to make sure in terms of when we're talking about entrepreneurship and innovation, we are really clear about it being as much about entrepreneurial mindset as it is money in the bank. Yeah, it can get a bit overwhelming sometimes. I think people talk about unicorns and we're going to have all of these staff and have all of this money. If that's your business model, fantastic. That is awesome and we want you to succeed. If that's not your business model, that's awesome and we want you to succeed. So let's make sure that the scale of the business that you're wanting to create, you get what you need around you to be able to do that. So use this evening, use the opportunities to network with the speakers as the night goes on, use the opportunity to meet with Queensland government staff across a range of different agencies, because we are, as Pauline said, we genuinely want you to succeed in whatever it is that you're wanting to do, and we genuinely want to help grow your network and really make sure that we can help you on the path to whatever it is that you're wanting to develop. on that, I will say thank you for coming. I'm really looking forward to the conversations, and I'll throw back to you, Pauline.
So don't worry, Julia's going to join us back on a panel very soon. So we've got a few exciting opportunities tonight for you to hear from some fellow entrepreneurs, business owners, motivated humans that are actually paving their own way in their own right for their different thing. And we're going to explore a little bit about that. And the first person we're going to invite up is Pacharo Mzembe. So please join us, Patch. So I had the privilege of meeting you. Is it working?
Me?
Yep.
Yo. Okay, what's up? Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And this is why we're still friends.
Yes.
So if you can work with people who actually bring that kind of energy to a room, it just makes life just so much more interesting. And there's going to be a few, you as well as a few others on the stage tonight. Obviously, we're following Julia's suit as well. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
First, tell us, how many hats do you wear?
How many hats? I wear a few hats. I've just walked out of a rehearsal room. Right now, I'm co-producing and directing theatre stage play. My other hat is the founder and CEO of Collab Operations, which is the company that is looking after those shows, directing in film and TV as well. Then the other major one is acting. I'm one of the series leads in what was a Disney show, but now an AMC show, which will premiere in America in spring. And it's a beautiful story, which I can't wait for the whole world to see. Oh, yeah. The show is Nautilus. It's based on Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I should know that. It's a press kit for the whole show. But yeah, it's based on that. It's a 10-part series, and it was a very expensive show, and I can't wait. But yeah, it took 297 shoot days to film here on Gold Coast, Brisbane, and Ipswich.
I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
It's amazing to see all the hats that you operate under. Some are so varying. You work tirelessly. I get to see that so many others. You're so humble. What got you started into all of these things, and what was like sort of that spark that, you know, was the thing that got you going into the first step, I guess, into acting?
Acting is actually a funny story. I got into acting. I went to Ipswich Boys Grammar, just I think, is it southeast? Southeast Queensland. And me and my brother went there on a rugby scholarship, and I was just looking for a class to stretch in. Went in there. Drama teacher said, "Hey, maybe you should give this a good go." Went in there, gave it a good crack. When I was 17 years old, auditioned for the National Institute of Dramatic Arts. I got in at 17, and 3 years later, learned Shakespeare, learned ballet, tap, accents, got fully thrown into the industry, and then everything else went from there. I can go further, or do you want me to just shorten it up? So
just keep going. So okay, so Ipswich Grammar, so that sounds a bit privileged.
Yeah, but I ran very fast. Me and my brother, we didn't pay our fee. Pay for that.
So what?
Yeah.
So how did it feel getting into Ipswich Grammar, then going into acting? You obviously are quite young. You know, was it a challenge to get into acting? Was it something going from, you know, your background? What is your background?
I'm born in Zimbabwe, but I'm of Malawian origins. And yeah, it was very, very difficult. Usually, you would most likely know when you were young as well, usually you're the only black kid at the school. So when we landed at Ipswich Grammar, and Pauline Hanson's kids were still there at that school, and that was throughout that whole One Nation period. And so confidence was an all-time low anyway, because it's very hard to speak because you don't see yourself usually in most spaces where you're at. So yeah, drama class was very, very difficult. But it was only until the end where I didn't focus on making people laugh. I focused on making people feel things. That's where I got my confidence from, where I started to commit to the characters. But yeah, it was difficult, but you just pushed on through.
Now you are doing your own business, obviously. You have obviously navigated a pathway to get into a show that is actually broadcasted overseas. What was the pathway to go from drama out of school into that realm?
Well, it was actually not a long one. I'll summarize it. It was an interesting one. So I graduated, I go to NIDA, I graduate, and then I start to do some film and television. I fly off to the US after Richard Branson had created the first Brisbane to LA flight. First trip, I get my manager. Second trip, I get my agent. And I'm enjoying the acting game. But then my father at the time, who hadn't been there for most of my life, I run into him. I read his autobiography. I get inspired because I finally know my full history of where I'm from in Malawi. And I decide to take some time out of acting. And I made a stand. It was called the Run of Awareness. I ran from Perth, Adelaide to Sydney over 70 days. It was 4,189 kilometers. And that was my stand for two organizations, Room to Read and Youth Off the Streets. And it was my homage to my father, who was insane on education. So I did that. And throughout that process, to fund that whole run, which ended up being close to, I think, the expenses around $100 and something thousand. I just know after the run, I was in a lot of debt. But in order to generate revenue for that, I set up a company called Mzembe Pictures. I then purchased two 5D Mark IIs. These are cameras, and a 7D. And I filmed it. So at the moment in post-production, there's a documentary that's been collating a lot of my career. But in that 70 days, there's footage that most of the world hasn't seen unless you've been in the edit suite of me doing that run. But in order to do that and finance that venture, I had to learn everything about the Australian Security Investment Commission, the ATO, and I had a lot of mentors there to try to give me the ins and outs. So I would say my business journey started from me trying to do this charitable thing, but I knew you needed to understand business in order to do that.
You sound so sure of yourself and like certain and like you kind of had a plan. Was that actually the case?
There wasn't always a plan. One of the biggest things that I have, or my motto for PM Collab operations is be unafraid, live your unafraid lifestyle. So as long as you just jump into it and you go hard, especially when you're young, and you just got to understand that you're going to fail along the way. So through the failings, I gained confidence because, well, to use the run as an analogy, I had to run on average 60 kilometers a day to make it on, so I left February 26th and I made it there on May 6th at Bondi. And every single day you're running, you run your 10K, 9, all the way down to 1, you clear your 56K, in between you're walking and you're eating. And the only thing that you got going through your head is just one more step. You don't look up, you look down at the white line on the side of the road and just focus on that. So I wasn't confident all the way in my business ventures. I learned the hard way. I overpaid certain people. I was talking about a story where the guy who built my website for the Run of Awareness started to charge me $80 a pop for a change or iteration on my website. And that's when I started my software engineering journey, because I said, man, I'll just learn this PHP thing. So I would throw myself into everything. So I'm not always confident when I run in, but I run in hard, and then I'm just learning along the way.
What do you think are the secret traits to that? Because like you do come across as very confident. I know I get asked a lot. I feel like people think I'm confident as well. I have the white line things. I just follow one step at a time, yeah. And so be it, so be it. But it sounds like you have something extra, like there's something that's pushing you, driving you, motivating you. Do you look for something to like give you that spark, or do you not have down days?
Oh no, there's a lot of down days. Sometimes the whole thing is just on fire, like the whole building's on fire. But perseverance is the thing that I've come to learn. Patience, active patience, so be doing something, and perseverance. It's not going to last forever, even the horrible times. So that gives me confidence. It always dissipates. But with that, I also understand new things are going to arise. So I'm never overly, when I was young, I would get very excited when good things happened and very down when bad things happened. But the older I've gotten, I try to stay in the center. When a win happens, yeah, I'll run around the boardroom or run around on set. Then quickly I'll rope everything back in. And also same thing, if something horrible happens, whether it's someone passing away or a big debt comes your way, you go, look, man, this sucks, but there's good times around the corner. I've been here before. So perseverance and active patience, I think, is the go. But there's always something to take care of.
It sounds like you have a very clear, like, trust in yourself, in your ability to navigate these things. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think but that's been developed over time. I like to look at numbers and I like to look at events that you've achieved or things that you've overcome in your life and use that as confidence. So when I was very young, I used to look externally. And I didn't realize that I had a plethora of things that I could be very proud of. So whenever it gets tough, I remember I'm from a village in Malawi, and me just getting to Australia is a win. Me getting through English grammar is a win. Me doing all these other extra things, they're wins. But if you just look at your own path, where you've come from, then yeah, you just sure of yourself and you just keep on moving forward.
Been sort of your strategies for funding to keep going? Like when you've looked and you've got a massive debt, you came back from the run and you've got debt built up. What did you do? How did you get through that?
Add value. Always be adding value and think outside of the square. So when the run of awareness was happening, I remember I said, just ask people for the thing because they don't want to give you money. And well, not everybody is going to give you money. So with the run of awareness, I remember going to a company called Endura. I don't know, you might know them. They do like sports drinks. I didn't ask for money. I asked for the tubs to fuel me. I went to a running company called Get Running. I asked for 12 pairs of shoes. I asked for things that I knew they could part ways with. And it wasn't just like, hey, give me 10K. Hey, give me 50K. I asked for the things and I would do the work. So the run of awareness was fully funded off seeking the elements that you need and go after that. Because usually money, you get given money, you're inexperienced, you blow it, and you're learning of someone else's cash. So seek the actual thing that is actually going to help you move forward.
Looking for alternative ways of capital rather than just the cash itself.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So a couple of things. You are a self-taught software engineer. Now, going from something quite creative, but also very structured analytical because you've built your businesses and actually run productions and produced, to actually software engineering. What was the switch? How did you go about that? What was like the first start of actually, okay, this guy's ripping me off on my website or just charging me too much and I can't afford it? Yeah. What did you do to switch over and actually start dabbling in software engineering?
First was YouTube. If you have a problem, and this is before ChatGPT and Udemy and all these different courses that now pop up, YouTube was everything, Google and YouTube. So PHP was first because it was a WordPress website, and then learning about databases. Then I started from the ground up, CSS, understanding what that was, well, HTML first actually, then the styling. Then I was on JavaScript, and then later on, a mate of mine just said, hey, man, you got to drop that PHP. That's some ancient stuff. So now, and for any PHP developers here, sorry if I've offended you. Is anyone using PHP still at the moment?
The firm, no.
Okay, so I haven't offended anyone. Anyone in TV land? I apologize. But yeah, it was YouTube at first, then just doing it. I would get the software up and in between sets. So we have a thing called a cast tent area. So in between shooting a scene, they might be setting up the lights. They might be setting up, sound or background action, which is extras or featured extras. They relax all the actors to a cast tent area. There I'd have my laptop and I'll just be coding, learning different functions, playing around, but then honing into what I wanted to focus on and what problems I wanted to solve. So that then, I guess, told me in what direction I wanted to go. And for me, it was online distribution. So I learned a lot about AWS. And I learned a lot about the back end and databases. So, yeah.
We're going to open up for some questions in a sec, so please have them ready. Another question. What is next for you? Like, what is the next journey? Where will we see you? Will you still do some coding on the side? Will it become a major thing? What's going to happen next for you?
What's next? Next is PM Collab operations is growing. It's only a year old. And so earlier this year, I directed my first short film narrative. Now I'm doing a stage play. Then when this show airs and goes for season 2 and season 3, it may take another 297 days. What's next is learning the art of delegation. And that's what I'm currently in right now. And for any young entrepreneur, understand that skill, learn how to create processes and systems so you can quickly start to slide other people in, delegate and grow. So what's next for me is mastering that so I can be on a film set, not be stressing that I need to be on that laptop. Otherwise that site's crashed or this is going on. I need to solve that problem. So what's next for me is PM Collab operations as is, but hopefully Nautilus becomes a big hit like Game of Thrones in 52 different countries and driving a Bugatti. Okay, no, that last one's a joke.
That's really cool. When does that come out again?
That comes out in spring in America, so in 2024.
Any questions? Feel free to raise your hands or pass the mic around. Do you want me to ask one? Do you sleep?
At the moment, I'm doing 20 hours and 4 hours sleep because I also got a 1-year-old, 14 months. But I try. That's one thing I'm gonna get better at. Monday to Friday, I really push it very hard. Weekend is about going to the market, spending time with Bob and my other half, but yeah, Monday to Friday, and especially now because of this show, yeah, it's a 20 to 4 split. Yeah.
Apart from like it actually doesn't accumulate, like you actually have to sleep at some point.
Yeah, on some days the body will just be like, hey, you got to go sleep. But I go to the gym, I try to stay active. I got a stand-up desk. When I talk on the phone, I'm moving. If I sit for a long period of time, so there is not much TV. If I sit and I get a little lazy and I start to scroll on YouTube, watch a little bit of my LA Lakers in action, and yeah, I start to doze off. But usually stay active, eat right, then you're good.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Got one over there. How do you manage everything? How do you balance everything? Thank you.
Balance everything. I'm not sure if you're familiar with time blocking. Everyone's got their own version of time blocking. For me, I have a lot of review processes throughout the day. I got a pad that I work with. So instead of writing what I need to do, I live my life a little bit backwards, where if time has elapsed, I check in on my pad and I see the review of what I did that last 2 hours. I might say, I had breakfast, was on the phone here for 30 minutes with this individual and solved this problem and did this, did that. So when I come out 2 hours later and I start that same review process and there's not much difference between the two, then I start to get a little anxious and worried about how I'm spending my time. So that's how I usually manage things narratively on how things are going.
Great question. Yes. That better? That is the best tip I've had all night. Thank you. Snap.
My bad. I think I've been distorting the whole time.
No, I think he meant me, actually. You're an actor. You know what you're doing. Yes, the gentleman behind you.
Well, our ethos is inspiring fearless aspirants. So I live my life a certain way. So for the public, when it's public facing, it's about inspiring fearless aspirants. But right now I'm working with an artist herself who doesn't understand the technological world, doesn't understand too much of the marketing side. So PM Collab Operations is about using our network to grow them. So I've been trying to find this healthy medium to educate them. And also, like I said, public facing, inspire other fearless aspirants who are on that journey, who require resources and yeah, pretty much resources. I hope that makes sense.
Made sense? Aspirants, maybe.
Oh, any individual who's on an aspirational journey, who needs inspiration or who needs any collaborative networking or anything like that, they can come to me. So right now it's at its infant stages where I'm working predominantly with creatives and also some athletes. So if a young guy who's 18, 19 comes to me, I got a very big sporting background, and they say, hey, I want to play for the Queensland Reds. We then try to figure out that journey for them, and I use my network and reach to try to get them there. So in the end, we hope to be in many different avenues, and I leverage on my stardom to keep feeding and growing it. But like I said, I'm at the stage where I'm learning the art of delegation, where I need other people who are actual experts in those fields to come work for the organization, and then I can fully clearly define different areas.
Awesome. One more question.
How do you actually keep your teams engaged, like your team members engaged?
Engaged as in motivated, or engaged as in we're connected together?
Both, like motivated for like to work with you.
Motivation, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a technique called Scrum. Yeah, so I use Scrum. I check in throughout the day and use a little bit of my management plans. So we're fully on the same page on what are you doing? What's your objective? Have you done it? Is the deliverable done? So we're always constantly checking in. Inspiration wise, they're pretty, I've worked with Gideon a lot. They're pretty good. I got a homie down there in Melbourne who works for a company called Stream Motion, who I constantly check in. So at the organization, it's predominantly me at the moment, and then just contractors who jump on in. Because like I said, I need to work really sharply, really close before this show airs to get myself away from doing a lot of these tasks that I'm currently doing.
Round of applause. Thank you so much, Pat, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So I have the honour of welcoming Simon up to the stage. So Simon is a co-founder of Lab 17, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also a partner, a friend of ours at River City Labs, amazing mentor, not from Brisbane, living in Sydney, but travels here often.
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time in Brisbane, especially when we launched Lab 17. So that was about 5 years ago when one of our launch partners was Schedulo, and I think we joined them when they were kind of going into Series B round of funding, and we had a partnership with them for a couple of years.
What's Series B?
Series B of funding, so just going through the different funding stages, and like Lab 17, just rewinding to that, we provide a embedded talent acquisition solution. So we work with predominantly companies between Series A to Series C, but we also work with founders at early stages and seed funding, and we embed ourselves within organizations and help them grow their teams, hire the right talent, but then also scale their talent acquisition function. And I guess the end goal is to eventually roll off our partnerships and leave them in a better place than when we found them, so they can continue to scale.
You guys have such a colourful array of clients that you work with here, but you've also had such a rich experience and background getting to this point. What got you started into Lab 17, and can you walk us through a little bit about your background and your career?
Yeah, no worries. I guess I'll go back to the early days. Like I grew up in Darwin, so which is Larrakia country, saltwater people, and my family's originally from East Timor. And my parents they escaped from a civil war in 1974 between two political parties in East Timor. And I guess my parents and my brother and sister always joke that I'm the privileged one because they obviously came over as refugees and they went through all the hard times. And my mum wasn't meant to have any more babies, and then I came along 10 years later. So they set all the solid foundations. So I was the privileged one. But growing up in Darwin, there's a heavy emphasis on different communities there. It's a multicultural melting pot, and there's a big Timorese Portuguese community which I'm a part of and very proud to be a part of. And when I was in school, there was a focus on, I guess, tradespeople, small business owners, and sports. AFL, NRL, and for my particular family, it was soccer, probably from the Portuguese heritage. But yeah, look, I think I didn't really see there wasn't much influence in tech. I think my only influence in tech was maybe a Sega Mega Drive in the early days, and then obviously advancing into PlayStation.
Does everyone know what a Sega Mega Drive is? Just checking. Video game.
Yeah, so consoles, and basically just playing soccer all the time on consoles. And I think growing up, soccer was a big part of my life. I call it soccer because it's just easier for everyone else, but I would call it football normally. And yeah, growing up, it was everything I did from like 5 years old. My dad played it, my brother played it, my sister was kind of allowed to play it by my dad sometimes. And we had our own, I guess we were part of our club there, which was founded by the Timorese community when they moved over in 1974. So being a soccer star was all I wanted to be, like from 5 years old. And then when I was 16, I had the opportunity to move to Adelaide. Growing up in Darwin, everything else as a reference point is down south. So it was, a big opportunity to move down south to the big smoke, to Adelaide when I was 15. So I moved there, and it was like the first time I'd moved away from, my family and community. And yeah, it was pretty daunting. Like, I think it's like, it kind of reflects now that I'm older, that probably one of the most daunting memories was going to your first day of high school and not knowing a single person. But yeah, Adelaide was a big step for me, and kind of where I've ended up now, because it was the first time I moved away and kind of had my own independence. And I stayed there, finished year 11 and 12, started university, didn't finish university, but started business and economics. And that Adelaide experience was amazing. Like, I got to play football, train 4 times a week, play on weekends. I was lucky enough to be a part of a club called White City for 4 years, and their heritage is Serbian. And they took me in, and I stayed with billeted families, which was amazing. But it also came with its hardships, like missing home. And then go from there, I kind of got to early 20s and I just got to a stage where I wanted something else. And, soccer had been a big part of my life, but I've always been motivated about, different goals and different passions. And football was a big part of that, but then travel and seeing the world was also a big part of what really drove me. So I moved from Adelaide to Sydney, and I lived in Sydney for about 5 years. And initially I started working in retail, in managing a store in Circular Quay for French Connection. And then there was an opportunity to, or what I call now, to get into my first proper job. And I think in my career, what I've always been motivated by is like setting myself goals and intentions, and like, what is my next step? Like, what am I driven by? It was soccer, and then it was travel and seeing the world. And then when I got to Sydney, I was working in retail, and you get to meet a lot of colourful people, and I was in Circular Quay, so there was a lot of international people as well. And I really love that job. It gave me like a bit of a taste of managing and P&L and stock and retail related tasks. But I wanted in my mind a real job, and a real job for me, coming from Darwin, was wearing a suit and going to the office. So that was my first motivation to step away from that job in French Connection. And I met a guy who actually just came into the shop, and we got talking, and he offered me a job in media sales. And then, like, my first objective was obviously wearing that suit, so they gave me the opportunity to do that. It was working in an office in the CBD, so I was like, tick. And I think at that time it was only like $40,000 in terms of base salary, but that didn't really bother me. That wasn't like my motivation. But going into that role and meeting the GM for that company, like, whenever I've had opportunities, I always try to like align with what I can take away from the experience that will get me to that next step or that next level. And with that role, it was business development, like cold calling. And this was like, I remember my first day, you got there, you had a desk, a notepad, the internet, and you basically just had to start finding numbers and ringing people, getting past gatekeepers, hopefully getting to a marketing manager or a senior marketing manager and pitching them about the Royal Easter Show and having their advertising on the screen there, or ECA. We also do like events for Rugby World Cups or Football World Cups. So it's just like emergency packages, just ringing them up, cold call. Hey, we've got this deal. I saw that you're advertising on the TV at the moment. Would you be interested? So for me, it was about getting my first real job, wearing a suit, and then it was about honing some skills around business development.
So then you made your way all the way to the other side of the world. How and what got you over there, and what were you doing?
Yeah, so I stayed with that company for a few years, and then the travel bug was like really kicking in. So I've got a Portuguese passport through my heritage, and I decided to move to London. And I had some friends over there and a pretty good network of people that I'd met in Sydney. And taking that business development skill and thinking about travel, I started speaking to a few different people. And I thought, oh, recruitment makes a lot of sense. Like, I enjoy speaking to people. I'm confident about ringing someone up and doing a business development call. And then there was an opportunity to go into SAP recruitment, which is obviously more enterprise. So I thought, okay, this is another step in another direction. And another big opportunity with that role was to work in SAP, but to focus on the Scandinavian market. And I just thought, I don't think I even really thought about Scandinavia at that point in time. Obviously, being from Darwin and growing up in 33 degrees heat and 80% humidity, like going to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden on a weekly basis wasn't something I constantly thought about. But again, it was just like another opportunity where, okay, I've got this chance, what can I take away from it? And it was just, for me, it was, going into SAP, working with enterprise level clients, continuing to focus on business development and honing those skills. But then also thinking, oh, this is completely different culture that I've really never thought about, and part of the world that I guess online looks intriguing. So I took that opportunity and started working for a company called Red Commerce.
You then worked for some other giant tech companies. One particular was Spotify, right?
Yeah.
And that brought you back to Australia, is that correct?
Initially, it was a funny story. So I was working with a few Swedish people in the Scandinavian team, and there was this guy named Matthias. And I remember we had a morning sync, and he basically was telling me and a few other people about these friends that he have that know these people, that know these other people, that are going to start this app that is going to revolutionize the way that people consume music and combat music piracy. And I remember he had like access to a demo account at the time, and he showed it, like he did a little demo, he showed us, like gave us a link. And, at that point in time, I'd been in London for a few years and doing what a lot of Aussies were doing. I was living in Hammersmith and Clapham, North London. And I was happy to continue with my YouTube account and listen to music on a little dodgy speaker. And I didn't really pay attention to, the opportunity of what he was presenting. And then he and another person moved back to Sweden. Spotify started sort of taking off and gathering momentum. And my co-founder now at Lab 17, Nick Ingle, he was also in London at the same time and doing recruitment as well. And a contact of ours, Sigrid, reached out and said, hey, are you guys interested in coming to Stockholm and working and looking at a job with Spotify? And at that point in time, it wasn't a part of my trajectory. It wasn't like where I saw myself permanently. I'd been going to Scandinavia with Red Commerce, but I didn't see myself living there. Nick, on the other hand, he's born in country New South Wales. He's really tall, blonde. He looks Scandinavian. And it was his dream to meet a Scandinavian woman. So that was his motivations, and he took it. And he actually became their first sort of like technical engineer based in Stockholm. And then fast forward, I still went on my own journey, moved back to Sydney. And then by this time, Nick had been there for a few years with our contact Sigrid. They reached out and said, hey, we've got a managing director starting in Sydney called Kate Vale. And Kate, she had launched, she worked for Google, she'd launched YouTube. And they said, like, they need a second person, like a second hire on the ground to help her build the team, focus on operations, and basically just get shit done. Are you interested? And I said, yes.
Fantastic journey like that, and how much tenacity and risk you've taken just to get all the way around the world and come back through with a wonderful vehicle of Spotify. So thank you for sharing that. Spotify, to obviously a wonderful, array of roles that you've had. Therefore, you've learned so much. What then got you into starting up Lab 17?
Yeah, I think it was like from an early age, like growing up, mum and dad have always had their own businesses. They've always had supermarkets. They've had cleaning businesses. Dad had a fruit juice run. So, and all the while they still had, full-time employment. Dad always worked for Woolworths or Coles as a store manager. Mum was a librarian. I think from an early age, like I always knew I wanted to do something of my own, to build something. And it wasn't really like the mentality of like owning something that's mine. It was more the inspiration I got from mum and dad about, okay, if you do have this level of commitment and you can build something, it allows you to give opportunities to the people around you. So with mum and dad, it was about giving myself, my brother and sister all the best opportunities in life. And, we were growing up and down, we were lucky enough to go to the best schools. We're always lucky enough to go away on school trips and represent, Northern Territory at different sporting competitions. And I always really appreciated that they did that through hard work and commitment and wanting to build something not only for themselves, but for us, and also have a positive, influence on our community as well. So from a very young age, I was always driven by that. And then I think, working with Spotify, being a part of that growth journey, and then leaving Spotify, and I worked for Safety Culture, sort of joined them post Series A, and the founder there, Luke, and he was originally from Townsville. I found his story quite aligned with, my upbringing, and what he's managed to do and continues to do with a company like Safety Culture was pretty inspirational. And I think after being in tech for such a a long period of time, I thought, hang on, there's these companies scaling. They invest a lot in talent acquisition and using recruitment agencies. Maybe there's a different way we can do this.
Love it. To get started and leave the comfort of a paycheck and start your own thing, what are some really tactile things you actually did to get started that might help some of the people in the audience?
Yeah, I think, and there'll be plenty of people in this room that have had that same experience. I think that's the scary part, right? Going all in and getting out of that comfort zone of a pay cycle, and just forgetting for a moment about responsibilities and the pressure of what you have to do, and then focus on maybe the opportunity. What's possible? What could happen? What if I do this? What is the worst that could happen? I think that mindset about removing fear and risk, or even actually, I think for myself, I've always, I'm naturally an introvert, and fear has always been a part of me as an individual, fear of failure, fear of letting my parents down, fear of not being, good enough as a soccer player, or fear of, traveling to the other side of the world and, being insignificant. But I think once you take that fear and then think about the opportunity, I think that's where you can find a lot of source and energy and power to do stuff that you probably think you couldn't.
That well, you definitely demonstrated fearlessness through your career. So thank you for sharing. I'd love to open up for any questions of Simon. Don't make me make up a question again. No one wants to learn how to get into Spotify? Oh, we got one there behind Patch.
Just wondering if you are using any of your soccer skills in your.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think
Repeat the question. Did you end up using any of your soccer skills in your career?
Using
for the online
soccer skills in my career. Yeah, I think with sports in general, the mindset of constantly practicing and getting better, and the feeling of when you do something well is something I've always taken into every situation that I face, personally and professionally. So when you're playing a sport, when you do something, you can remember how it felt. You can remember the sound of the ball. You can remember the body motion, the feeling that it gave you. And I think when I've approached work or professional challenges, like going into it, I've always thought to myself, okay, what am I good at? What can I learn? And then thirdly, what can I leverage from people around me? And I've always used that, sporting competitive edge as well, just to sort of drive me forward.
Yes, we've got a question in the middle and at the back. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks very much for sharing that. Quite an inspirational story. I guess my question is, with regards to you uprooting yourself and moving to different kind of parts of the world, was there a particular mindset or a particular, character trait that you had that you kind of hung on to for that? That must be quite challenging, I'd imagine. So.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been driven by curiosity. And I think when I was younger, and maybe other people have experienced this as well, especially, having such a strong culture and identity and a massive family growing up in Darwin, you always think, like, why can't I just do what the other kids are doing? And why can't I sleep over people's houses? Why can't people sleep over my house? And growing up, mum and dad we don't do that. And the things that my parents would do when I was growing up that would embarrass me, now I find myself doing the same things as I get older. So I think curiosity about other cultures has always driven me. But as I've got older, realizing the power of my own identity and embracing my own culture, and then rather than trying to fit in to situations, is using that power and leveraging it to share with others, to share your journey, to share your storytelling. I think whenever I've traveled, I've always taken that mindset into every situation, because quite naturally I'm very introverted, and I'll stay to the back of a crowd. I find it very hard to introduce myself initially until I get comfortable. But I think curiosity and just embracing your own identity and what makes you special.
Beautiful. One more question.
Thank you, Simon. I'm really enjoying your storytelling. You're a great storyteller. Just a little bit kind of a different take. So you got the phone call from your friend.
Yeah.
Not many of us can get phone calls. Networking is a really difficult thing when people are trying to build their business and create, a space for themselves, whether it's a small business or a large business. What would, I guess, you in the world of recruiting and, all of those things, what advice do you give to people who don't get a phone call, have a dream, and, want to be able to actually access that magic network that many people don't get an opportunity to tap into?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I think, I go back to what I said earlier about intentions and always having a plan of, where you want to be and the direction you want to go in. Like, if I think about that Spotify example, there was, the journey before that kind of, that it created that outcome. And I'm not saying that that's always going to happen, but even now, if I think about Lab 17, and obviously the market has been quite challenging in terms of talent acquisition and tech over the past 12 to 18 months, there's always opportunities when you're not looking, but you've also got to create those opportunities as well. And I think River City Labs is a great example where you can, meet a lot of people and network with a lot of people. But I think, going back to what Patch said as well about adding value, looking for opportunities to add value, not only to others, but to your future journey is, what I would advise as well. So getting involved with community, going to events like this, looking for other, initiatives that you can get pleasure and joy from that could unearth an opportunity. Lab 17 has given me a bit of a platform to obviously work with amazing tech companies, but beyond that, I've taken that opportunity to work with companies like Solar Buddy, Rainforest Rescue, Take 3 for the Sea, things that I'm passionate about beyond my day-to-day. And I think I always try to think about bringing balance to my day and my week, because I naturally, when I'm anxious or think I'm falling behind, I've always thought I can grind my way out of this. I can work, my way out of it. But I think as I've got older, I've realized actually having a balanced approach and thinking about what makes you happy, what brings you, other types of joys beyond just a professional outcome, you can find opportunities in that as well. So I think summarizing that, thinking about your network, thinking about your community, thinking about how you can get involved in other things that may potentially unearth more opportunities.
Can I add to that? Because obviously I know Patch as well as yourself, Simon, and you guys do demonstrate two traits, which I think would support your question. And that is knowing how to build an authentic relationship. So when we first met, I don't even know how we actually first met. You probably cold called, given that's a skill you did learn early. And I know obviously we met through your brother Gideon, and both of you, when we connected on what we were personally interested in, not on what we did.
Yeah.
So when we were having conversations and learning about each other, we truly connected about who are you as a human and this world you're living in, and you just felt energetically drawn to these two, and therefore when opportunities arose, people you think of are them. So I'm sure, given you met Spotify a few years later when they were already taking off,
yeah,
you had the call because they probably connected with you at that earlier time, and that's why you guys got the call. So I think it's like whenever you're going out to these network events, it truly is about a give first and being as authentic as you can, because everyone can smell a salesperson from a mile away, and it's really outdated, and it's also hard to do. Like, no one wants to be that person. It's really a forced trait to like try and be the person selling the goods, when really we're all here just to connect with people and see how we all evolve, and hopefully that comes alignment with what you really want to do and for your business. But you both demonstrated how to build authentic relationships, and you were a give first mentality before you took anything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Please, and can everyone just take a stand up and just shake your legs a bit? I know you guys have been sitting for a bit.
Thank you. Yeah, we're in sore bum, sore neck, sore back territory right now, guys. So please have a stretch. We're almost there. And if you do need to go, please go, because it thins out the herd of anyone who's going to ask me some really difficult questions. So that's good.
Thank you. All right, take your seats. Okay, so Vu, we are so privileged to have you here. Thank you for coming and sharing your entrepreneurial journey with us, especially as a multicultural background that you have yourself. And you have talked on a lot of this cycles on the stages in the emerging technology sector, but not necessarily maybe in the audience that we've got in front of us. I'll let you guys get settled. You good to go? Checking. I can feel rustling. Yeah, good. Sit. Yeah. Vu, who are you and what is Go One?
So good evening, everyone. My name is Vu. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Go One. I can see Paulette's here. We are a proudly Logan-founded headquartered company. I've got the privilege of starting this company with my best mates from high school. The best way to think about Go One is think of us as the Netflix or Spotify for workplace learning. We provide training to workplaces all over the world. Started Go One with my best mates, grown from a team of 4 to about 800 or 900 people across 22 countries globally. Go One's about a $3 to $3.5 billion company, depending on the exchange rate at the time. And we do it all from right here in Queensland. This is home for us. It's where we've grown from, and it's where we're located.
Now that we've got your $1 billion company out of the way, I want to learn more about Vu. Vu, what started you off? Obviously, go way back in the Wayback Machine, and tell us what started your entrepreneurial journey. Because I know it had something to do with your co-founder in school, but it was a lot longer before that.
So I'm the child of Vietnamese parents. They were Vietnamese refugees. I was born here 10 years after they arrived. So Christine, you spoke about, being the youngest in the family. I am the youngest in my family by 10, 12, and 14 years. I get told by my siblings I was the accident, right? But I grew up in a very, very privileged opportunity compared to say what my siblings had and what my parents had. They fled war, they fled Vietnam with literally nothing. When they arrived in Australia, they had nothing. So for me, I've got a firm belief that migrants actually have a natural tendency towards being entrepreneurs. And the reason why I say that is because if I look at my own sort of family and particularly people of my parents' generation initially, who all came here as refugees, they all owned a business of some sort growing up, a takeaway store, a convenience store, a restaurant, something like that. For me, growing up as a kid, my parents owned a convenience store. And so I knew nothing but working in a shop. When I was 7 years old, my job was to man the checkout. My job was to be able to check your ID if you want to come buy a packet of cigarettes from the shop. That was my job. I was that weird kid who could do that. I knew whether or not you were regular and you liked your Pall Malls, your Marlboros, or your your Winnie Blues. So for me, at the end of the day, I've always grown up in a household where owning and running a business was actually quite normal. So as a result of that, you know, when we were in grade, I think it was grade 11, I remember writing a business plan for Andrew, who's our CEO, is my best mate, and I said, let's start a business. We started off building websites for people, PHP backend, front end, CSS, HTML.
He's the guy charging you $80
so
a check.
that's how old I am, right? But one of the things that it came back to for us was when everyone was getting a job at Macca's or Woolies in grade 11 and 12, we went out and registered an ABN.
How did you have that site?
It wasn't, in all honesty, it wasn't abnormal. Like, as I said, growing up in a family where my aunties, my uncles, my parents ran a business of some sort, I thought to myself, well, what's the business I can build? The idea of wanting to build something was something that was really exciting, particularly for myself and Andrew. And so it was more of something fun to do, something going, how do we actually build something? The idea of also being sort of the masters of our own destiny at that point in time, you know, not working for the man was actually a pretty cool idea. We spent year 11 and 12 building our business, going door to, hands up if you've ever sold door to door before, hands up, anyone? Do you want to do it again? No, yeah, nor do I. But that's what we did. We went door to door after school and sold websites to businesses. That's how we started out. You know, if I think about Ali's story about starting off in the professional services space, that is where we started off and we transitioned into the software and building out products.
So can you tell us a little bit about that transition from doing the websites to actually building your own products? Like, what did the first 12 months look like?
First 12 months, first 6 years, right? Like, so we started off building websites for people because, you know, it was how we got into tech. We're self-taught, like you were saying there, Patch. And, you know, we didn't have qualifications or degrees in, you know, software engineering. We just figured it ourselves, YouTube, etc. But for us, one of the really big parts was we knew we wanted to work in technology in some way or form. You know, we saw that as the place where you could actually build whatever you want. It's the Lego of business in a lot of circumstances. Your entry, you know, your barriers to entry are incredibly low. In a lot of circumstances, you can teach yourself on YouTube, as you were saying. You need to be able to have access to an internet connection. Like, we export hundreds of millions of dollars of software every year, yet we do it all via code. We're not exporting physical products. And we, as I said, we can do it from right here in Logan. So from my perspective, when we started out, that journey was just building websites. Now, working in professional services is a very challenging space. You're fighting paycheck to paycheck. You're a consultancy, right? You're going in and you're going, the money I earn today is not going to be there tomorrow, so I've got to go out and get another gig and another gig and another gig and another gig. But the other side of it is everything that you build is not yours. You're building it for someone else. You're building it for another customer. You're building it for someone else's purposes. And so we got to a point where in about 2013, 2014, we had a, we'll call it an agency of about 10 to 15 staff at the time. We're all still in university. We thought we were doing very, very well. And I remember Andrew said to me, we've got to get rid of it all. I thought, bloody hell, man, we've spent our entire sort of adult lives, you know, we're probably early 20s by then, and I just finished uni, Andrew had finished uni, Chris had finished uni, the other Chris had finished uni well before that, and he said, no, we've got to get rid of it all. We've got to, you know, the word's used a lot now, but we've got to pivot. And I kind of didn't understand why, and, you know, this is where I love Andrew because he sees things that other people don't see, and he said, we do not own the product. We built it on an open source CMS called Drupal back in the day, which is the alternative to WordPress. We built products for other people, but at the end of the day, there was nothing there that we owned. But more importantly, there was nothing there where we could hang our hat on at the end of the day when we look back at it in the future and go, we've done something impactful. We've done something that made a difference. You know, a lot of people have spoken about purpose. And so, you know, I actually strongly disagreed with what Andrew was proposing to us. But one of the things that as founders, as co-founders, we've been together for 17 years now. I'm 34 this year, spent 17 years doing this. And one of the things that's been really good, and one of the things that I think I've been most lucky in our journey, is actually meeting my fellow co-founders. It's got nothing to do with the business side of it. It's actually the relationships that we've been able to grow. And one of the things we're really good at is disagree and commit. Andrew's our CEO. He's got one of the hardest jobs. He has the hardest job in our company. So even though I grossly disagreed with it, I committed wholeheartedly to it. And I'm glad I did. So we went through an accelerator called Y Combinator, or YC, in 2015. We raised a few $100,000. We then, you know, Simon was talking before about the different rounds you go through. So you might have a seed or pre-seed round, which might be before you have revenue when you've just got an idea, which for us, the idea was in online learning and in the online learning space, because we knew there were two things we really love. One is technology, and the other thing is learning, education. And for us, K-12, everyone, if you look, wherever you look in the world, all investment into education is in the first 25 years of life, K-12, tertiary education. But most of us will know that where you learn the most is actually in the workplace, on the job. So that's where we decided to focus, and that was the opportunity that we saw. And, you know, 2015, we went through YC, we raised a seed round, and we went through the valley of death and ran out of money and had to re-raise money and didn't know if it was going to work. And then we've just hustled and grinded to build a company. I mean, Pash, you spoke about that before. Simon spoke about it. This idea of actually working really, really hard to be able to get to where you want to be. None of it came easily. I think by the time I was 21 or 22, so my background is a medical doctor. I'm a general practitioner. But by the time I was 21, 22, I'd finished medical school. I had a medical degree, so I had doctor in front of my name. So I could actually go out and get any credit card I wanted, which meant that I could go and get and this is well before, and this is, you know, Jules spoke before about the programs, and you mentioned it before. This is before venture capital was really a decent thing here in Australia. We're talking about 2015. The rules of the taxation sort of incentives around investment didn't exist then. I think Wyatt Roy and Malcolm Turnbull brought it in the following year or two. So for us, the venture capital environment didn't really exist. So we did the smartest thing you could do, which is fund it with 22.5% interest on credit cards. So by the time I was 22, I had probably 6 or 7 credit cards. Chris or Andrew had a few as well. We were collecting them like Pokemon cards. And I would be able to go to Commonwealth Bank and get a brand new credit card, 40 grand on it, do a cash advance on whatever it is, 32 grand of it or 80% of it, and then pay instantly 22% interest on that cash advance, walk the 30 meters down Underwood shopping centre to Westpac and put it in for pay for that fortnight or for that month. And we did that regularly. And I only paid off those credit cards, probably a few years ago. And I share that with you because, by the time I was 22, 23, I had probably $200-something thousand of credit card debt. And again, you're paying 20% interest on that every single year, including as soon as you take that cash advance out. So the environment we have today is incredibly different. You mentioned before the challenges in women being able to get funding. I agree with that, but it's also the environment is just a lot different in terms of being able to get funding, right? We didn't even know what venture capital was. We didn't know that that was a thing, obviously, because that's why we got credit cards. But I share that with you because the environment has changed significantly. We have people, Simon mentioned Luke Anir from Safety Culture, people like, Mel and Cliff Perkins, the CEO of the biggest private company in Australia, Canva, is Mel Perkins, right? Like that's something that people don't talk enough about, right? You've got people like the guys from Atlassian. So they are all the people that we look up to and go, okay, actually, that's the bar we could or should be aiming for. And I think that's really, really important. A lot of the time, ambition is what limits us.
Can you explain a little bit about your personal journey in managing, a few $100,000 in debt? And, was there not stressful moments? Like, how did you actually continue to just keep fixated on the goal?
Not knowing any better, right? That's the first part.
Excellent.
Right? Like, no, has found it. It's true. It's true. Like, you know, if you read Steve Jobs' biography, they'll talk, Isaac Walton will talk about the reality distortion field that he had, right? If you listen to the other one, which is the Elon Musk one, we'll talk about the same sort of thing as entrepreneur. And if you listen to a recent interview with Jensen Huang, who's the founder of NVIDIA, he says, you know, they asked him the question, would you go on the founder journey again? And he said, knowing everything I know, no, because it's incredibly painful, incredibly challenging. Because if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So the thing I would come back to is that we found it incredibly difficult. It's incredibly hard. You make a lot of sacrifices, and that's why the people you do it with is incredibly important. So I love my fellow co-founders, and I mean that truly. That's why we've been able to stay together as long as we have. But it's also meant we've been able to get through the most challenging times, because having people next to you, having people knowing that you're going to run through fire, run through a brick wall, but you're doing side by side with a whole bunch of other people you care about, makes a really big difference between that and doing it alone. It's why I really take my hat off to solo founders. It is I could never do it by myself, right? But I think, you know, because I've got my best mates next to me and we go through that together, we often have this feeling of we can do anything. We can figure out anything together. Between the four of us, we think we're smart enough to figure out any problem. If it is solvable, we can solve it. And that's not arrogance, that's confidence. And that served us incredibly well.
How did you deal with some of the setbacks? So obviously, I know you guys would have received a lot of no's along the way. Many successful founders have. How did you personally deal with the setback?
So I think there's two things. I'll share with you if you ever look up Go1's cap table, you ever look us up on Crunchbase, every single investor said no to us at some point. So I'm talking Microsoft, I'm talking about SoftBank, I'm talking about Seek. All of the investors on our cap table, Airtree, everyone you can name at Salesforce, we've collected them, again, like Pokemon, right? They all said no to us at some stage. But what we did was we went to them and we said, well, look, this is who we are. This is what we plan to do. Would you like to invest? And the answer is no. We go, cool. And we come back to them a year later and we said, you remember what we said we'd do? Well, this is where we are. What do you think? And then they come back and most of the time they said yes, because we fulfilled that promise. We said we'd do it. We did it. And then that track record and that ability to fulfill what you're going to do, fulfill what you say you're going to do, is incredibly powerful, because it gives them confidence and it reduces the risk. The flip side of it is when they say no, a lot of people take that personally. But if you do remember the fact that they're investing other people's money, this isn't a charity, right? They have to be able to make sure that the money that they're putting in isn't going to burn up and incinerate. Literally, the word we use in startups when we are not making money is burn, right? So at the end of the day, if you're going to burn money on a startup, the risk reward, calculation you make as a VC, I'd imagine, has to be very, very well calculated, and you have to be willing to literally put your money where your mouth is. So we don't take it personally. We never did take it personally. I think that's the first thing when people say no to you. The right way to take it, I believe, and this is something that I've learned from Andrew and Chris in particular, Chris Hagen in particular, is when someone says no, they say, thank you, please tell me why. Because that curiosity allows us to be able to learn and understand more. And most of the time, in fact, all of the time, the feedback you get is potentially life-changing. It's potentially going, you've got someone there who looks at all these pictures on a regular basis, and they can give you an insight that you might not have because we've got our blinkers on, we've got that reality distortion field. And so I think it's really important to understand that a no is a not right now, but also at the same time, be curious and understand why it's a no. Many people get insulted, and that for me is more to do with ego than it does with a desire to actually create something great.
From the time you first started the idea of Go1 to now, how much has it changed?
Regularly. I think that's really important. What we went through Y Combinator with is completely different to what Go1 is today. What we wrote the business plan for when we were 16-year-olds is completely different to what Go1 is today. And I think that desire to reinvent yourself, see opportunities and chase them is incredibly important. So I could probably not name the 1,000 or 10,000 pivot points we've had throughout the last 17 years. But what I could tell you is we search for them. We look for them. Because if you don't, you end up in a situation where someone else is going to come and eat your lunch.
That requires you to not have an ego, really.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is I think there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. The confidence is this belief we can solve any problem. The arrogance is believing that you're better than anyone else or you know more than anyone else. And I think there was a discussion earlier around values. And for me, Chris, Andrew, and I share very similar values. It helped that we went to school together, right? But having people that you share very similar values with makes it a lot easier to navigate challenges. And, I don't think between the four of us, when we are debating a topic, there is ego, at least not now. I'm sure when we were 19, 20, 21 and we're duking out trying to think who's got the best idea, there probably was. But the great thing is that ego existed at a time where there was no, low stakes, right? And so that's what I mean by we were very fortunate in terms of the timing of when we met each other. We got to know each other. We got to build that relationship over the long term. It's been a marriage. And that for us has laid the foundations for us to be able to do what we do today.
What advice would you give to solo founders who now they're listening to your story and go, wow, that sounds like a better pathway. Let me find someone. What kind of tips would you give them to finding a co-founder in this day and age?
So you don't necessarily need to find a co-founder. What you need to do is find people that you trust, right? Your early executive team, your first hire, your second hire, your third hire, your 2 IC, because those are the people who you can lean on. Those should be the people that you can be brutally honest with and that can be brutally honest with you. They don't have to be a co-founder, but it has to be someone that you're willing to be vulnerable with, someone that you're willing to open up to, because that's the only way you're going to be able to get through some of the really, really challenging times. So it's not about finding a great co-founder. I think if you go out looking for it, it can be really challenging. I think you've got to be open to engaging with people and having conversations, because you never know where a conversation will take you. You'll never know what you learn from it. You never know where it might lead you. For us, when we were doing the door-to-door, we went up and down Old Cleveland Road selling websites one day after we finished grade 12, just before uni started. And we'd been rejected every single time we went up and down that road. And Sandy and Pauline have heard this story plenty of times. And every time I tell it, it's 200 shops we got knocked out, we got yelled at and abused and told, go away, and then turned into 400, 500, 600. So this time I'm going to say we got kicked out of 800 different businesses that day. And it was 4:30 in the afternoon, and we said, okay, and it was middle of the summer, let's go to our mate's place and have a swim. And just before his house in Carina off Old Cleveland Road, there is a hairdresser. And we went and we go, do we knock on that door? Should we go in? And we're like, well, we've rejected 1,200 times that day, so why not? Let's just go in. And so we went in, something made us knock on that door. We went in, they told us to bugger off, but the owner heard and said, I'll talk to the boys, and they bought a $2,000 website off us. Now, what I can tell you is that this is when we were 17, we hadn't turned 18 yet, we just finished high school, and we could track our first 300 customers from the business we grew over the next few years back to that hairdresser. It wasn't that they recommended 300 people to us, it's they recommended someone who recommended someone else, who recommended someone else, who recommended someone else. And through that whole loop, we met the people who would be the earliest investors in what Go1 is today, right? I tell that story of people, 2 reasons. One is always knock on that one extra door. The second is you never know where a conversation will take you.
You're a busy person and you obviously have a large trajectory you're planning for Go1 with your co-founders and your teams. But how do you manage your day-to-day personally and the micro planning that happens to get to these big, ambitious, audacious goals?
Making, I'm throwing out a whole bunch of cliches. Making yourself redundant as the organization grows bigger is incredibly important, because if you can hire, initially as a founder, you're doing everything. You're cleaning the toilets, you're doing sales, and you're supporting the customers. But as your business grows, particularly at a large scale, and I'm going to say very large scale, because I'm a big fan of founders still doing everything up until the very last minute, because we need to keep our finger on the pulse. But as it grows to a much larger scale, particularly global scale, it's really important to make sure that you think about how do you hire people who can do things better than you. Julia said it before, you've got to be able to find people who can do things better than you, who can do the job better than you, because that's how your business is going to grow. And for me, I think we found people who can do everything better than us, with the exception of the things that they can't do. So I can be here in front of you today and tell the founder story of Go1. I can't hire someone to do that because they haven't had the same experience and journey. So I think about it as the tide going out, right? And that pool of what I need to do in the business gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it gets down to the point of the things that I can do that no one else can do. But that does not start early on in the business. Early on, you cover everything. Because as founders, we often like to get rid of stuff really quickly. So many founders want to get rid of sales really quickly, and usually that ends up them burning lots of money. But the thing that I really think about is that eventually it reaches the point where you need to be able to find really good people and make yourself redundant across those roles and really focus on the things that you can do that no one else can do.
Have you ever felt burnt out?
All the time, right? Being burnt out is one of those things that people say, oh, it's part and parcel of what you do. The way I look at it is it also gives you the opportunity to reassess and sort of listen to yourself, listen to what your body and what your mind is telling you and go, should I keep doing this? Most people ignore that and they think there's some sort of honor in ignoring what your body is telling you. Patch, you were talking about running, right? There is a certain point where your body says you got to stop. And many people go, nope, I can break through that pain barrier. But there will be a point where you reach your limits. And I think it's really important to listen to that. So for me, that ability to burn out has been drawn out because of the fact that I've got fellow co-founders. So that makes life a lot easier. I've got 2 young children. I've got a 4-year-old and a 20-month-old. So yeah, you've got a 12-month-old. Like, it keeps you grounded because suddenly I realized, and there was a certain point 3 or 4 years ago when I had my daughter where I said, every minute I spend on something else is a minute I'm not spending with my kids. And so suddenly the opportunity cost of that time actually had value. And I thought to myself, do I want to be spending my time doing this, or doing this? Because if I'm wasting it, then I'm not wasting money, I'm wasting time with my family. And that suddenly really, really helped sort of open up the afterburners for me because it made me realize of going, I'm only going to spend my time on things that are valuable and that are worth it. And if not, I'm not going to do it. Now you go, oh, well, that's such a luxury because you've got a large company. And the answer is the larger your company is, the bigger the surface area is. And so the answer is going, it doesn't matter how big or small your company is. The most precious resource we have as founders is not capital, it is time. It's time you could be spending with your families. It's time you could be spending working on a different startup. And so a lot of the time we waste that time. And so that feeling of being burnt out is something that can occur regularly, and it has occurred quite often. Having really good co-founders with you is really, really important. And the second part of it is managing your own mental health, right? For me, I have a psychologist I see regularly, not because I'm trying to fix anything, but I think about it no different to exercise, right? You don't go to the gym once and go, I'm sweet, I never need to exercise again. I wish, right? It's something you need to keep working on. And one of the things that I remember my psychologist was saying to me is, she said, Vu, you keep saying things like should. As founders, we often say we should be doing this. Oh man, I'm stopping, I'm having a break, but really I should be checking over the P&L. I should be doing this or this and this. And she really helped me and she said, every time you say should, I want you to change that to if I wanted to, I could, right? Just think about that. So when you say, I should really be getting onto this tender response that we've got to write. And then if you change that to if I wanted to, I could, what that's saying is you're making a choice. There's not a gun against your head. And if you read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the things that Stephen Covey talks about is the circle of concern and circle of influence. And that is really strong in helping people deal with anxiety. And as a general practitioner, I still see patients. And when I see my patients, one of the key topics we deal with is anxiety. And I talk to them about focusing on what they can control, not on the things that they can't control.
I just feel great about all of this. Is fabulous. Now, questions. Here we go. I'm in the front. Hello.
Just piggybacking on what Julia was saying, something that's you want to be known for. Want to be known for the cross-cultural, as the cross-cultural connector. And I started a business about 3.5 years ago. Piggybacking on that, I just want to know 1 or 2 anecdotes on what was the first market outside Australia that you went to, and if you can tell us a bit of the story.
Yeah, sure. First market's the US. That's pretty easy. The reason why is if you want to be a global company, many people tell you, especially in the software world, you need to go to the US. And so we did 5 times. We failed 4, and the 5th time it finally worked, right? When people talk about burning money, we incinerated it trying to go to the US, right? And it's why I spend a lot of my time talking to founders and giving them the advice to learn from some of the things that we learned. So the first thing is Everyone goes, so as a founder, and I'm going to just generalize here, what you're going to do is you're going to go, I raise money. And if you, let's say you're a B2B business, you're selling to other businesses, you're going to go, first person I'm going to hire is a salesperson, or even better, a head of sales. Because as a founder, we don't want to sell. I say, cool, well, if that's what you're going to do, can I have $150,000 and we'll go light it on fire together? Because that's probably what you're going to do, right? So one of the lessons that we learned was don't go hire a salesperson. You actually have to go, you have to make the sacrifice and go there and be on the ground and sell on the ground and actually be the person leading the charge there. You cannot outsource things like sales in your business early on, because at the end of the day, good salespeople understand your product very well and understand your customer very well. And who understands the product and customer better than anyone else in a startup? The founders. So for me, that's an example of the sort of advice that I give people when it comes to going overseas. Do the hard thing, do the hard work, because most of the time what they do is, and I've seen it happen so many times, I can almost write this script every single time, is they go, we've raised money, let's go spend it.
Question. I see you in the front. I can give it.
Hi, Vu. Thank you for that really great insight. I've listened to it a few times, but every time.
Tell the story for me.
No. Every time there's new stories coming out. So I wanted to ask you a couple of things. First one is the pivot point, you know, through your capital raising journey, because you failed many times, but what is the pivotal point that actually, your first investor or your first VC or your first, I don't know, $1 billion investment, whatever you want to say. And the second question is about exit. What is happening with Go1?
So the first point is, so the first question there is around, what's that inflection point? And I don't think I could pick anyone in particular. I think the first inflection point was we first took outside money because we realized that there was actually value to what we were doing, and someone else outside the business was actually valuing what we were doing. And it's the confidence you get from that, right? Today, and again, feeling like an old crusty person when I talk about what it is today versus back in our time. But today, I think many startups take investment for granted. And I think that investment is a right. They should be investing in my company. And it's like, well, back then I thought people were crazy for putting money into us, right? I can't believe we conned them into giving us money. Right. So I just want to come back to that as going, when you get that first investment, that first check, you should really appreciate it, because it means someone is actually willing to put their money where their mouth is and back what you do. It's why we've got amazing relationships with our earliest investors, because they backed us as founders, not necessarily knowing where the business would go. Now, it's really easy to write checks later because the risk is taken off the table. So for me, I think that inflection point is probably very early on. It's a bit of a cliche, but